Good afternoon, this is Felicity. I'm speaking to you from my library, and I've been absent a little bit, haven't had very much time with all these new knees and whatnot. I've been working and stuff, but I certainly have been reading, and my echo essaying is proceeding apace. So I thought I would talk a little bit about that, and a couple of items I was going to read out loud because I'm sorry, Echo has got to be. He is really funny guy. Funny, witty, erudite, pointed, a little sarcastic, great stuff. Anyway, a couple of the ones I mentioned last time that I think I'd already finished. One of them was Misreadings, and this one I think I already mentioned, the previous one. So I'm making a collection now of all the essays I have now either reread, this is a reread, or have finished possibly for the first time. Anyway, Misreadings. This one, this was a collection. This was, I think, the first collection of the essays that he had written, short ones for Diario Minimo back in the 60s or 70s. So these ones were the first ones he did. How to Travel with a Salmon was a collection, a second collection, which for my money is much funnier. I don't know. I can't help myself. I laugh every time I get there. So this one, I can't remember if there was one particular one that I really enjoyed from that, or whether I just said, these are all great. So the Misreadings, and regretfully, oh that's right, regretfully we were returning here. That was the essay where he imagines that he's a publisher that's been that has to turn down the Bible as presented by some anonymous person, and Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, and why it was not possible to publish it in this day and age. Very good. All right, so Misreadings, definitely done. One that I finished in the last week or so was the 6 Walks in the Fictional Woods. Now, this was a series of, these were the 6 Norton lectures that he gave, and he praises, he pays homage to Calvino and Borges, both Norton lecturers, and I guess Calvino died before he could finish his. But both of those writers are particular favorites of Eco, so he talks about them, and the whole series, all six lectures deal with woods, getting lost in them, literary woods. The one, of course, that I remembered very distinctly, which again showed up on literature, was so this one was the Myths of the Valois, which was, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, Woods of Loisy, which was the first time he goes through and talks about Sylvie in great detail, and the mists that come up. And what actually really struck me was that Eco says that he'd been reading Sylvie since he was very young, and that over the course of the last 4 years, at the time that he'd written this one, and also the second one, that he had dissected it, he had taught it, he had parsed it, he had sliced and diced it, he had analyzed it every which way to Sunday. And he said, and yet, every time he opened Sylvie again, it was as if he had never done that, and he was lost in the woods of Sylvie once again. I really like that description, because I'm also a rereader and proud of it. No shame there. But each one of these, so Sylvie does show up in a couple of these lectures, but he does talk about a number of different elements where getting lost in something, where there's an impenetrable mystery, or some other obstacle, or not obstacle, just somewhere to be lost in literature. So these were great to reread. Also, the last time I read it, I think I only read the one on Sylvie, so reading them again as a mature adult, that's me, I'm a mature adult, was really a treat. I'm really enjoying rereading Eco, because most of my first readings were quite a while ago. So now I can really appreciate it. This one I also mentioned in my previous video. The Travels in Hyperreality, the title essay, is a fairly pointed discussion of traveling through America, which I thought was a little too sarcastic, but yet amusing. And this also, so there's one here that I thought I would mention in detail because I think I mentioned it probably just in passing, but one essay is Casablanca, Cult Movies and Intertextual Collage. And I recall, so I remember as I was reading this for probably the second or third time, oh my goodness, I don't usually spend much time watching films because I'm not a visual person, but I always feel when I'm watching a film that I should be reading, and so I end up doing that. But reading this essay definitely made me feel like having another go at Casablanca and paying better attention. I love the way it starts. Cult. Was that artillery fire, or is it my heart pounding? Whenever Casablanca is shown at this point, the audience reacts with an enthusiasm usually reserved for football. Sometimes a single word is enough. Fans cry every time Bogey says kid. Frequently, the spectators quote the best lines before the actors say them. According to traditional standards in aesthetics, Casablanca is not a work of art, if such an expression still has a meaning. In any case, if the films of Dreyer, Eisenstein, or Antonioni are works of art, Casablanca represents a very modest aesthetic achievement. It is a hodgepodge of sensational scenes strung together implausibly. Its characters are psychologically incredible. Its actors act in a mannered way. Nevertheless, it is a great example of cinematic discourse, a palimpsest for future students of 20th century religiosity, a paramount laboratory for semiotic research into textual strategies. Moreover, it has become a cult movie. Right. So, yeah, I really enjoyed that. Another one that I did finish last time was Umberto Eco's Inventing the Enemy. And I think I was trying, when I was looking through this one, just trying to decide which one I liked the best. That was a really hard one. I think possibly my favorite one overall, just what a beautiful essay, was Imaginary Astronomies, which begins, I would like to make it clear straight away that in talking about imaginary geographies and astronomies, I will not be dealing with astrology. The history of astrology has continually crossed paths with that of astronomy, but the imaginary astronomies and geographies I will be talking about have all now been recognized as entirely imaginary or false, whereas businessmen in his estate still turn to astrologers for guidance. Therefore, astrology is not a science, whether exact or otherwise, but a religion or a superstition, superstitions being other people's religions. Thank you, Umberto. And as such cannot be demonstrated as true or false. It is only a question of faith, and in questions of faith, it is always better not to get involved, if only out of respect for those who believe. Yeah, that's just the first paragraph. This guy, Eco, was a genius. Anyway, so that one was those the usual kind of little snarky little pokes and prods, but this was a really beautiful one. And he's talking about, with obviously great love and fascination, he's talking about all these scientists and really sincere historians and mapmakers who, in much earlier times, tried to imagine how the universe was put together. And we know some of those stories, that the big ones like Galileo and Columbus and Ptolemy and those guys, but he has a much more in-depth look at it, which was great. The funniest one in here probably was the pastiche, made up of excerpts of genuine critiques of Ulysses by James Joyce when it was first published, which would have been, yeah, just about the rise of fascism in Italy. And Eco puts together this essay called Ulysses. That's all we needed. And I'm going to give you a little taste of this one. A strange novel came out a few years ago from the pen of Giacomo Joyce, or Joyce as Guido Priovini calls him, or Joyce. Few have read it, since it is written in English, a little used language. In attempting to describe it, now that the French translation is available for more educated readers, I feel such a confusion, victim of feelings as incoherent as the work that inspires them, that I shall proceed by way of observations here and there, notes for further development, which I propose to number so as not to give the impression that these paragraphs are intended to follow each other in any logical or consistent order. 1. This work, like Joyce's other books, was known in Italy only to a few, and most of them had heard about it from others since there were rumors about it in artistic gatherings and intellectual salons. All right. Goes on. 2. There again, having already read his previous book, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, we realize that at the end of the book, everything falls to pieces, and the writing, as well as the ideas, explode into damp fragments like wet gunpowder. 3. Let us say straight away, after a first laborious reading, and without further ado, that Ulysses is not a work of art. 5. It is no surprise that Joyce, a second-rate Irish poet living in Trieste, says it was he who discovered Svevo, another author who writes atrociously. In any event, Svevo is perhaps the Italian writer who has come closer than anyone else to that passively analytical literature that reached its culmination in Proust, and it is second-rate art if art is the work of keen and active men, if a painter is worth more than a mirror. And so it goes. I just finished this guy here a couple of days ago. So this was Umberto Eco on literature, and this is the one I said I was just kind of getting started on the last video I did. And what was fascinating about this was he does talk a lot about, these are various essays. I think some of them were the ones for the Milan Festival. But what he's talking about here is he's talking and analyzing various works of literature and his own studies, and as you read it, you realize that you're trying to I'm trying to pick out which bits fed the novels that he wrote that we are so fond of, which you say that oh yes, of course, well, this is 2-year research into monasteries and the Middle Ages clearly was feeding Name of the Rose, but it could have also been feeding Baudolino. And this was great. There was one, I think it was one in particular that I pulled out to, and of course he pays homage to again his revered precursors. And one of the ones that was a little harder to read but fascinating was Borges and My Anxiety of Influence, and he begins it. I have always maintained that one should never invite heart patients to a cardiologist's conference. It's not a cardiologist's conference; it's a literary conference. These all were published at different times. This particular one was one of the paper. It's a paper given at the on Borges at the University of Castilla-La Mancha, with the assistance of Department of Italian Studies and Emilio Goggio, chair of the University of Toronto. But he of course he's talking about his immense knowledge of Borges and his immense appreciation of Borges in various stories. And of course, since I just finished the entire fictions of Borges again, it was timely and really delightful reading through and saying, oh yes, there it is. Oh, there's the labyrinth. Oh yes. I would like to consider the call. And that is why I spoke of Borges as a delirious archivist. What a mastery of language! And this is just in translation. This was really great. And I think there were a number of these. I might have touched on them before, but there was a number of essays in here essays, papers, lectures that I clearly had not read before. So that was great. All right, now on my read list, I said I was saving this one for when I was feeling a little out of joint and needed something to cheer me up. Well, I couldn't resist. I mean, I'm in pretty good spirits right now because I can walk around. I can do all kinds of things I wasn't able to do for the last couple of years. But How to Travel with a Salmon sets you laughing out loud like a fool from the very first essay. How to Travel with a Salmon. I am not going to read that one because I've read this way too many times. For example, here's one. This was the second of these two collections. The misreadings was the first one. Collections of his little columns in the Diario Minimo from Ilveri. Up till 1961. So these are early, delightful, effervescent little works, and this one was a conversation in Babylon. So this is a dialogue between the Tigris and the Euphrates in the shade of the Hanging Gardens, not many thousands of years ago. And the conversation is between Uruk and Nimrod. And I am not sure if I can actually do this justice, but I will at least start. Uruk begins. He says, "How do you like these cuneiform characters? My new surf writer composed the whole beginning of the Hammurabi Code in about 10 hours. Nimrod: What did you use? An Apple nominator from Eden Valley? Uruk: Are you nuts? You can't trade in one of those things even in the Tyre slave market. No, this is an Egyptian surf writer, a Thoth 3 Megas DOS. Very low consumption. 1 bowl of rice a day, and it is a hieroglyphics program too. Nimrod: You're just cluttering up its memory. Uruk: But it formats while it's copying. You don't need a separate surf formatter anymore to collect the clay, mold the tablet, dry it in the sun, while the surf writer does the rest. Mine molds, dries at the fire, and writes directly. So this proceeds with the two of them definitely having geek talk for a while, Nimrod offers to pick up this latest laptop, the latest laptop. So Nimrod had said, "Why don't you use a portable?" Uruk: What? One of those liquid crystal Chaldean screens? That's Magi stuff. So he goes on, and they're having a conversation about the joys of this new technology, Uruk says, "Well, what about calculation?" Nimrod: Oh, it speaks zodiac. It will produce your horoscope in a matter of seconds. What you see is what you get. Uruk: Does it cost much? Nimrod: Look, if you buy it here, the harvest a whole season wouldn't be enough. But if you can get someone to buy you one in the Byblos street fair, it's yours for a sack of seeds. Demands a lot of input, to be sure, but you know the rule: garbage in, garbage out. Uruk: I'm still pretty happy with my Egyptian. If your dwarf is compatible with my 3 Megastas, couldn't you program him for Zodiac at least? Nimrod: In theory, that's illegal, because when you buy one, you have to swear it's for your own personal use. But everybody does it. Sure, I'll put them in contact. I just hope yours doesn't have the virus. Uruk: Bursting with health. What scares me, though, is the way they come out with some new language every day. In the end, the programs will all get confused. Nimrod: Don't worry. It could never happen here. Not in Babel. 1991. All right. So, yeah. This is the first time that I think I had run across this cellular phone diatribe. How not to use the cellular phone, where he says there are really only a couple of different kinds of the people who should be using the cell phone. He says it's easy to take cheap shots at the owners of cellular phones, but before doing so, you should determine to which of the 5 following categories they belong. First come the handicapped. Even if their handicap is not visible, they are obliged to keep in constant contact with their doctor or the 24-hour medical service. All praise, then, to the technology that has placed this beneficent instrument at their service. Second come those who, for serious professional reasons, are required to be on call in case of emergency. Fire chiefs, general practitioners, organ transplant specialists always awaiting a fresh corpse, or President Bush, because if he is ever unavailable, the world falls into the hands of quail. For them, the portable phone is a harsh fact of life, endured but hardly enjoyed. Third, adulterers. Finally, for the first time in their lives, they are able to receive messages from their secret lover without the risk that family members, secretaries, or malicious colleagues will intercept the call. He did another version of that, I think, later on, where he kind of like went and says basically, I'm not ashamed of it at all. And possibly my favorite, aside from the ones where I burst out laughing every time, which is how to travel with a Sandman, how to replace a driver's license, how to go through customs, how to travel on American trains, how to use a taxi driver, how not to talk about soccer, and so on. Oh my God, what a genius. Anyway, but my favorite is probably how to justify a private library. Not that I'm, like relating any of this to myself or anything, right? Yeah, right. Generally speaking, from my childhood on, I've been always subjected to two and only two kinds of joke. You're the one who always answers, and you resound in valleys. Yeah, right. Echo, echo, whatever. All through my early years, I believed that by some strange chance, all the people I met were stupid. Then, having reached maturity, I was forced to conclude that there are two laws no human being can escape. The first idea that comes into a person's mind will be the most obvious one, and, having had an obvious idea, nobody ever thinks that others may have had the same idea before. I possess a collection of review headlines in all the languages of the Indo-European family, going all the way from the echo of echo to a book with echoes. In the latter case, I suspect the printed headline wasn't the first idea that came into the sub-editor's mind. What probably happened was this. The editorial staff met and they debated some 20 possible titles, and finally the managing editor's face lighted up and he said, "Hey guys, I've had a fantastic idea." And the others responded, "Boss, you're a devil. Where do you get them from?" "It's a gift," he must have replied. I'm not saying people are banal. Taking as divine inspiration as flash of originality something that is obvious reveals a certain freshness of spirit, an enthusiasm for life and its unpredictability, a love of ideas, small as they may be. I will always remember my first meeting with that great man, Irving Goffman, whom I admired and loved for the genius and penetration with which he could identify infinitesimal aspects of behavior that had previously eluded everyone else. We were sitting at an outdoor cafe when, looking at the street after a while, he said, "You know something? I believe there are too many automobiles in circulation in our cities." Maybe he had never thought of this before, because he had had far more important things to think about. He had just suddenly had an epiphany and still had the mental freshness to express it. I, little snob infected by the unzeitgemäßige Betrachtungen of Nietzsche, would have hesitated to say it even if I had thought it. A second shock of banality occurs to many people in my condition, that is, people who possess a fairly sizable library, large enough, in my case, that someone entering our house can't help but notice it. Actually, it takes up the whole place. The visitor enters and says, "What a lot of books! Have you read them all?" At first I thought that the question characterized only people who had scant familiarity with books, people accustomed to seeing a couple of shelves with 5 paperback mysteries and a children's encyclopedia bought in installments. But experience has taught me that the same words can be uttered also by people above suspicion. It could be said that they are still people who consider a bookshelf as a mere storage place for already read books and do not think of the library as a working tool. But there is more to it than that. I believe that, confronted by a vast array of books, anyone will be seized by the anguish of learning and will inevitably lapse into asking the question that expresses his torment and his remorse. The problem is that when someone says, "Echo? You're the one who always answers," you can reply with a little laugh, and at most, if you want to be polite, say, "That's a good one." But the question about your books has to be answered while your jaw stiffens and rivulets of cold sweat trickle down your spine. In the past, I adopted a tone of contemptuous sarcasm. "I haven't read any of them, otherwise why would I keep them here?" But this is a dangerous answer because it invites the obvious follow-up. And where do you put them after you've read them? The best answer is the one always used by Roberto Leydi, and more, dear sir, many more, which freezes the adversary and plunges him into a state of awed admiration. But I find it merciless and angst-generating. Now I have fallen back on the riposte. No, these are the ones I have to read by the end of the month. I keep all the others in my office. A reply that on the one hand suggests a sublime ergonomic strategy, and on the other leads the visitor to hasten the moment of his departure. Just all right. Okay, so I am now currently working my way through The Name of the Rose. As you can see, I'm doing well, and I'm reading it very slowly this time because, as I had discovered my previous journal that I had kept, where I had decided I was going to go through and jot down all of the Latin phrases and translate them. This was a long time ago, pre-internet, and so there was a great deal more work to do, and I actually really didn't know what I was doing. And now with the internet and more knowledge, and having actually gone through a couple of years of Latin, I'm doing much better at it. And so I have started the journal again. There you go. Started the journal again, and I have a nice edition, which hopefully is not too bizarre. But it notes, I note on the side the page that the quote is on. So I'm writing it in my nicest, neatest handwriting. Yep. Hello internet, hello computers, not a thing. And then underneath writing the English translation. I am getting it almost wholesale from a couple of different sites where somebody else has done the work for me, and I'm verifying it because as I'm doing this and writing it out longhand, I am discovering that I am remembering more of the Latin than I thought I had. So although I do find myself kind of like stuck and looking up some words to say, really, is that what it means? I'm enjoying the process of refreshing and polishing up my Latin. It's kind of fun. All right, so I got two more here. One of them I am working my way through. This is probably the last book of the easy essays, or the really manageable or approachable essays collections. They get very literary, erudite, and semiotic, and more scientific after this. But Turning Back the Clock: Hot Wars and Media Populism is a collection of essays from 2000 to 2012, I think, and cover a fairly significant period of turmoil and disruptiveness in our lives. Yeah, so he touches on all of the obvious things, but yes, he gets a little bit less sarcastic, although there's definitely that there, and he gets more impassioned because he kind of is laying out a little bit more what he really, in his heart believes. Even though with that, he's still unable just to say, this is how it is, and I think this should be, and this is my ukase, and I'm just laying it out, is that he always, he's bedeviled. He has to see both sides of the question in a very echoish way. So I am currently working my way through part, I think I'm somewhere in the middle of part 3, The Return of the Great Game. No, so it's part 2. And I'm looking forward to Pasta Cunegonde, and maybe a little touch on Voltaire. But his titles are all fabulous. Yeah, Beauty Queens, Fundamentalists, and Lepers. These are titles of the essays, some of which were also papers or were lectures, but definitely work perfectly well as longish essays here. Hands Off My Son, The Return of the Crusades, The Defense of the Race. Are the Italians anti-Semites? Some of my best friends, some of her best friends. And a couple of them I think showed up somewhere else, because as I'm reading now, I'm trying to go through and read all of them. I'm definitely finding some repeats, but many that I've never touched on before. So this is actually really great, and I think my echo reading will continue apace but slow down because it's gonna get harder. Meanwhile, the last book, because well, it is the 31st of October. And there you go. I'm not really a Halloween celebrator, but there is the second volume of M.R. James, which seems the perfect candidate for rounding off today. So that is what I am going to be reading this afternoon, since I've been reading so much Echo. I'm going to read some ghost stories. I just finished. Ooh, yeah, I just finished the first one. So this is The Haunted Doll's House and Other Ghost Stories, and the one I just finished was The Residence at Whitminster. Ooh, creepy. James is genius. So that's it for me for this afternoon. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again. Hopefully, again, I keep saying this before 2 weeks has passed, but It's been pretty busy. I'm enjoying my library. I'm enjoying walking around. I'm enjoying reaching up and grabbing books from every part of my library again. And until the next time I see you, I bid you good day and bye-bye.